So imagine this. You go out for a run and the only thing you take with you is your house keys. By the time you finish, it's dark outside. You get to the front door and you try to open the door and your key does not work. So you knock on the door for your husband to hopefully open the door and let you in. But instead, a woman that looks very similar to you answers and tells you that you are at the wrong house. And your husband then shows up next to her and he's looking at you and it looks like he doesn't recognize you at all.
Say what?
Now, welcome to Twist, the whole insane story told, where we break down the entire plot of the most popular books on the internet. I would say this author must hate runners because the way that she started off the book makes you not ever want to run again. And as someone that does run outside and only carries a key with her, sometimes to only let her through the front door, now I'm having second thoughts of maybe I should start to carry some ID around with me to avoid situations like this. This is how the book My Husband's Wife starts by Elise Feeney. This is the very first book that I've read of hers and I had high expectations because I know these books that she writes has a lot of twists and turns in them, and I can tell you that I definitely was not disappeared. In the point where I think at some point maybe there was a bit too much twists and turns in it, and I was like, maybe you should just strip it down and keep it a little bit more simple because I do need a tad bit of character development here if I can. This is the latest book by popular author Alice Feeney, released just in January 2026. It's a psychological thriller where an artist named Eden Fox returns home and her house has a name called Spyglass. Now, you know, if a home has a name, it's probably quite a spectacular, you know, rich person's house. And of course it is. She is well off. But that's not the important part about how rich she is. What's important is that things are definitely not as what it seems. Her key, like I said, doesn't work, and another woman that looks exactly or similar to her, maybe possibly a younger version of her, is standing inside her own house now next to her husband. Her good-for-nothing husband also insists that she is a stranger and that the lady standing next to him is his wife and he doesn't know who the hell you are. There is one house, one husband, and unfortunately 2 wives under the same exact name, which is Eden Fox. Now, apart from this mystery that has happened, let's add another layer on top of that mystery and complexity to the story, because the book will jump time frames and it moves back 6 months earlier and then to present times and introduces you to a new character called Birdie, who is a recluse Londoner. She doesn't like to get out much, doesn't have many friends, and she's reeling from a life-changing terminal diagnosis. But how she is linked to this story is that she inherits Spyglass, the house. This unexpected inheritance is from a long-lost grandmother that brings her pretty much back to this location, which is called Hope's Falls, a small village by the seaside, where whilst she is there, she notices that while she's there and she goes to this new inherited house that her grandmother used to live in, she notices that her grandmother has received a very fancy letter from a London clinic. This letter helps predict a person's death date, including, now there's a lot of twists and turns in this book, especially right at the end where all the reveals just come barreling at you. And at some point you think it's a little bit too much, which is what I felt. But let's get into it and let's see where it gets us to. Now let's talk about the main characters that are going to be evident in this book that are important players in the story. You have Eden Fox, who is the runner that we are introduced to, and she's the one that has her identity stolen, allegedly. But there are plots and parts in the books where you're like, at some point, maybe that's not the case, but that is one of the main characters. Then you have Birdie, who I spoke about. Her full name is Olivia Bird, the recluse from London with a terminal diagnosis, and she doesn't have very much long to live. She inherits Spyglass, where Eden and her husband now live. So I suspect at some point she has sold it to these new couples. Then you have Harrison Wolf, who is the husband, Eden's husband, the CEO of a tech company, and he is the money bags. He's the ka-ching. He's the one that brings in the fortunes, supposedly, and he's very well off and your typical sort of well-off middle-aged man. Then you have Sergeant Carter, or his first name is Luke. I'll just call him Carter to make it easier, or even Sergeant. He's a local police officer at Hope Falls who helps to try to solve this mystery. But I use that word lightly in helping because sometimes you think he's either not very good at his job or he's purposely sabotaging the job, but you can decide that. We have some side characters that are important to the story. You have Gabrielle Wolf, Harrison's daughter, who is receiving care at a private facility called The Mansion due to an accident that she had when she was a child. Then you have Diana Harris, who is a gallery owner and is also a widower. That is important to know that she's a widower and she's single because she acts accordingly like a single, Black Widow sort of character. Then we have Maddie Carter, Carter's sister, who runs the local pub that a lot of the conversations and situations happen in this pub that is there, that lots of locals use and eat at. Now, when there is so many characters in a story, obviously everyone is a little suspicious and is written that way, and you'll see why as the plot unreveals itself. So the book starts on October 30th, and it's important to know the dates, and you'll see why later. Eden Fox has gone for a run. She's come back to her house, tried to open her house with her one house key, and nothing happens, and doesn't seem to working. She knocks on the door, and a woman that looks very much like her, dressed in a black velvet dress that belongs to Eden, that she was going to actually wear that night, answers the door, and Eden automatically looks at the woman and goes, "What are you doing in my house? Who are you?" And the woman answers, "I'm Eden Fox. I live here. What do you mean?" Now, Eden basically has had her identity stolen, so she thinks, and she has no ID with her because she's just gone for a run. So there's no ID, there's no mobile phone, there's nothing on her that proves who she actually is. Because she's refusing to leave the house, the cops are called, who is called by Harrison, the husband, and the husband's like, "Well, there's a woman at my house and she's disturbing us and she's harassing us and my wife. Could you please come around?" Not only has this woman stolen her identity, it seems like her own husband is denying her existence. But she thinks maybe it's because this woman has something on him, or maybe is forcing him to sort of lie about him knowing her. On top of that, she also has her first art exhibition that day, which is why, she wanted to get a run over and done with. And then she wanted to wear the black dress that this woman is wearing and be showcasing her art pieces for the very first time. And this woman is pretty much stealing her thunder and her life. Now, where she is showing her art pieces is at Diana Harris's art gallery, which is why I mentioned her earlier. And she cannot accept that this lady has stolen her identity. So instead of maybe going to Carter and the police office and try to straighten this out, she goes and stalks her husband and this woman that has stolen her identity at the art gallery and is spying on them, basically. Now, at the station, she is caught by Carter, but she's not really arrested because he's like, "Well, this woman doesn't look too threatening. I'm just going to take her down to the station with me and I'm going to try to sort this out and see who she really is, because she's definitely not Eden Fox." Because he's met Eden Fox, and Eden Fox is right now the woman standing in the gallery making a speech about how she's thanking everybody for coming so that she can showcase her art pieces. So he's certain that this lady, now insisting that she's Eden Fox, is a little bit not quite right at this point in time. Now, this Eden Fox that went for her run, also very much like Birdie, is very socially inept and doesn't like to socialize at all. She doesn't go out. She's not met the locals. Even though she's moved into this small town for a bit of time, she's made zero effort to make friends. In fact, she doesn't have any friends anywhere that can confirm her identity, and this whole art exhibition that has occurred was organized over email with Diana, and Diana has never met her, which seems a little bit far-fetched that you've never met this lady, but you are willing to showcase her art pieces. But that's how the story goes. This is why I think it's important to always to be sociable, to make some friends and mingle wherever you are, to have some face-to-face interactions just in case, not only for your good mental health, but also just in case sometimes someone decides to steal your identity, right? Eden doesn't even have a social media presence. It turns out that the lady that showed up at the door does have an Instagram presence and is known online as Eden Fox. And there are pictures of her life, which shows pictures of her home, which is Spyglass, and the art pieces that she's showcasing, which apparently she pinched from Eden's own phone, these photos, but she can't prove that to the young Sergeant Carter, can she? Plus, these pictures have been shared weeks ago, and it's not like it's been done to, like, right now. And there is even pictures of Harrison on this Instagram page, and even a picture of them together. So the plot is starting to look very much like, is Eden the one, the runner Eden? Crazy? Because everything points to the fact that this woman has had a good life with Harrison and is actually the real Eden Fox, and it's not you. There is even ladies from the local bakery that can confirm that the Eden that is presenting at the art gallery is the correct Eden, because she has been popping in since she's moved into Spyglass, buying fresh bread from them once a week. So definitely now things are not looking good for our runner here. Maybe runners are crazy and this is what the artist is implying, but I'm telling you, I am of sane mind. So do not take this book as a reflection of what runners are really like. Yes, we get up early in the morning and we pay money to run for kilometers and kilometers, but that doesn't mean we're crazy, all right? We still know who we exactly are. In my head at this moment, I'm trying to work out what Eden Fox's game is and what the twist is going to be. And because I've read a few thriller books now, not a lot, but I've watched a lot of thriller movies, and I'm thinking maybe Eden is an unreliable narrative and something happened to her in the past and it's made her a little bit cuckoo, or maybe let her think that she is someone that she shouldn't be. But there is one person that can identify who she is, and that's her 18-year-old daughter, Gabrielle Wolf. But unfortunately, she won't talk to her. So she steals Carter's car keys and throws them in the harbour and starts running back to Spyglass. So I suspect I thought she was stealing the car keys so that she could drive down to go to her daughter and sort of confirm my identity. But no, she just wanted to slow Carter down. So she took his car keys and threw it away, and then thought, I love running. I'm going to book it and I'm going to run it all the way back to my house, where I'm going to try to find evidence of who I am and try to, go through the things and find my ID, my passport, my phone, etc., and try to prove that I am the real Eden Fox. Now, when she gets to her house, Harrison and his wife is not there. They are still at the art gallery because she noticed that his car is still missing, but her Range Rover, her own car, is there. She breaks into the house because obviously her keys are not working, and she starts looking for all her IDs. But unfortunately, they are not where she has left them and she can't find anything. Now, this is suspicious that this maybe really isn't her house, because she doesn't seem to know where things are. And there's a little bit of a twist here where she doesn't recognize certain items, and so it makes you go down that route of, yes, maybe this isn't her house after all. And she tells you that since she's moved into her house, things has been a little bit off with Harrison, her husband. And the first time they move in, that's when they have their first rompy-pompy, and it's also the last time that they've had their rompy-pompy together. And he's been really drawn back and not wanting to do it with her after that. And the first time that they did it in the house, instead of being his normal sweet self, he seemed like a little bit aggressive and a little bit animalistic, almost like it was through anger and not through love. But then you're like, maybe that was all in her head and he was just trying something a little bit spicier. And I think, it's these little clues that you're meant to be grasping onto, because Alice, the author, is known to be quite clever, and she's just sprinkling little things in there that you have to hold on to. So obviously that is a fact that I remembered, and I was like, I wonder why that was thrown in there to tell you that he seemed a little bit maybe angry with her. The clues in here are either meant to make me feel like Eden is crazy, or it is stated as is, right? To see this is the way it is and these are her thoughts and these are just true and correct. Eden changes into jeans and a t-shirt because she has to get out of her sort of sweaty running clothes. And she notices that the jeans that she puts on are a little bit loose, implying that maybe these are not her clothes, or maybe she just lost weight recently. She also grabs a cashmere sweater covered in stars that isn't familiar to her, but maybe she's just forgotten because she has a fair bit of clothing. So these are the things that are like, oh, a bit iffy to give you clues, or they are just like as they are. Now, there is a noise in the house suddenly, and she notices that someone is home. She luckily finds her spare keys to her car, and the only solution here now is to drive and go to Gabrielle and get her to validate her identity. It is here where you find out at 8 years old, Gabrielle was in an accident, so that was 10 years ago. Eden and Harrison was hot and heavy back then for each other and decided to have their afternoon delight, whilst their 8-year-old daughter was left on her own accord and going for bike rides outside, which appears perfectly responsible for these adults to do that. But anyway, that's what they did. Now, after their rompy-pompy, Harrison showers and goes back to work, doesn't even sort of goes and says goodbye to his daughter, and he just disappears. Because if he was to go and look for his daughter and try to say goodbye, they would have noticed that their daughter is missing. And it's starting to get dark and it's starting to get worrisome. So not only is it dark, but it's also raining. The police are called. They hear sirens in the distance and they hear a police car getting closer. And then suddenly there is a screech of the brakes. And when Eden goes outside, she sees Gabrielle is lying on the road. And it looks like maybe the car or a car has hit her. Gabrielle survived the accident, but was never the same. She never spoke again and needed to be in care pretty much all the time. But at some point, Eden couldn't be the primary carer anymore and convinces Harrison that she needs to be put into more intensive care, and that's why she is taken now to the Manor, a facility that cares for her daughter, but really I think it's more like a fancy hospital or more like a fancy prison, let's say, because she is locked in her room and she can't leave. Middle of the night by the time that Eden gets there, but she demands to see her daughter and says it's a family emergency. So the staff there let her in. And by some miracle, they don't ask her for her ID to prove that she's Eden and just allows her to come in and see her daughter, which again is a little bit suspicious. Also a little bit suspicious because the staff at the door isn't someone that Eden is familiar with, so she's new, so she could not really even identify that Eden is the real Eden of Gabrielle's mother. But nevertheless, clearly she's new on the job and not well trained, and she just lets her in. You get told that Gabrielle was always a happy child before the accident, but she was never a kind child based on what Eden is thinking. She was a daddy's girl and always was very attached to Harrison, but not as much to Eden, unfortunately. And Eden has always thought that there might be something wrong with her, with the way so she acted towards her. Well, with thoughts like that, it doesn't make you think very much of Eden, the mum, at this point in time. Even though Gabrielle doesn't talk anymore, she does paint, but Eden says that her painting has always been very childlike because after the accident at 8-year-old, it seemed like her mental state stayed at 8 and she could only paint what she was like back then, even though she's now 18. But as Eden walks in through the door, she sees all these paintings and they are amazing. They're beautiful. They're no longer childlike and they're quite sophisticated. It was Eden that actually taught Gabrielle how to paint after the accident because obviously Eden is an artist herself and that's where she got her skill from. But now it looks like that her skill has almost surpassed the level that Eden has taught her because she is painting amazing photos, even terrifying because they are photos of her current home, Spyglass, and Gabrielle has never been there. So how the hell is she painting pictures of their home? Does she have like some weird psychic abilities? But we're not going into that right now because at this point Gabrielle turns, sees Eden and looks confused and scared and says, "She is not my mother." We're all shocked. At this point, I'm pretty sure even Eden is questioning her identity and also how is her daughter now speaking. So all she does is she just runs away because this lady loves to run. We know that running leads to no good, so just stop doing that, Eden. She ends up sleeping in her car in the middle of nowhere, but then she hears like a phone ringing, and it turns out there is a phone in the car. The phone is ringing and the display says no caller ID. When she picks up though, the person hangs up and sends a text which says, Eden, everything is going to be okay. Go to our special place at sunrise. I'll be there. Love you to the moon and back, X. This is something that Harrison says to her all the time, so it might be him, right? Her key ring that he gifted her when they brought Spyglass had that inscription on it to love you to the moon and back. And he gave that set of key to her at the top of the cliffs overlooking Hope's Fall. At this point, you know something is going to happen at the top of the cliff, but this fool doesn't care. She goes because she's desperate and she trusts her husband. When she reaches the top and is standing there at the cliff edge, she hears someone coming up behind her, and that's when she's suddenly just falling. And the last thought she has is, true love kills. Now we are going to jump 6 months earlier. We jump to Birdie. So as I said earlier, her full name is Olivia Bird, who has found out about her terminal illness and she doesn't have very much longer to live. I mean, she is someone that also doesn't have anyone that she cares about on this earth anyway. There is no one that she's going to be leaving except though Sunday. Sunday is a Siberian Husky and she found him abandoned a while ago when he was just a little puppy, and she adores him and vice versa. She needs to make sure though there is someone to look after him once she's gone, because he's pretty much the only thing in this world that she cares about. She does specify that there is something else that she does need to do before it's too late. There is a knock on her door. It's a middle-aged man who tells her that her estranged grandmother has passed away and has left her this property called Spyglass, a house in Hope's Fall. Hope Falls used to be her home when she was a little girl. It's also the place where her mother passed away when she was only 10 years old. And now I think Birdie is about in her 40s, so it's about 30 years ago, and she hasn't been back since then. But since she has a grandmother, she was wondering why, when her mother passed away, why she was put into foster care rather than going to her grandmother to live with her. It turns out it's because her mother and grandmother were estranged, and the mother did not want the grandmother to be looking after her daughter. But Birdie does remember Hope's Fall, and she does have good, quite fond memories of when she was there, very much like a little blanket of comfort for her. She goes back to Hope Falls to inspect Spyglass. She's not intending to stay here. Instead, she's going to be putting up the place for market, which explains why Eden and Harrison ends up buying it. And she's looking around the place. She sees this fancy envelope, like I said, lying on the table that looks like a wedding invitation. And there is 2 sentences on the front, which says, everyone knows their birthday. If you could know your death day, would you want to? It's from a company called Thanatos, I want to say, and they can predict your death day. And the name at the top of the letter is Olivia Bird, which is her name. It turns out that Birdie and her grandmother had the same name. This company didn't predict Birdie's death day. It actually predicted her grandmother's death day, and it was accurate. Also, when Birdie's looking around the house, she noticed there's a lot of photographs, and there's a lot of photographs of her as a child. So this whole time she's been thinking that her grandmother didn't care about her and didn't want her, but really from evidence, it looks like she was very fond of her. And she even found like Christmas cards and letters that were sent, that was going to be sent to Birdie but was never sort of mailed, written and addressed to her as well. So the grandmother always had Birdie in her front of mind, looks like the whole entire life, which is quite sweet. Birdie's still looking her investigations around the house. There is a knock at the door and it's Sergeant Carter. He is here checking up on the house as he knows that the lady that owned it had passed away. So really there should be no one up here. So he's thinking that maybe they're squatters, and automatically asks Birdie for ID just so he can work out if she is who she says she is and what the hell is she doing here. As Carter seems to know the grandmother of Birdie, Birdie wants to know and find out a little bit more about her grandmother that she's sort of forgotten about. Carter unfortunately doesn't know much about Birdie's grandmother either, because like herself, her grandmother liked to keep to herself and was very private, and she pretty much just stayed in the house the whole time, but she did have a live-in care, but unfortunately he doesn't know her name. Carter, unfortunately, is a character that doesn't really offer much help throughout the book, so don't be surprised by the lack of information that he's given here as well. But he was the one that discovered the grandmother after she passed away, and she passed away in her sleep, and the carer apparently wasn't even there. She was on holiday. The reason why Carter knew she had passed away, though, was because before the grandmother passed away, 3 days beforehand, she had sent him a letter, and the letter had said that this is the day I'm going to pass away, so please come and get me, basically, and sort of wrap everything up. There was no evidence of any foul play, and it seems that the grandmother just passed away in her sleep quite naturally, so there was no suspicion of anything happening. But potentially you're thinking at this point that, well, the house is really old, something weird is happening, maybe it's supernatural. As Carter says, she passed away in her sleep in the library, just wearing her reading glasses, and she has a book on her lap when she passed away, and she was reading Frankenstein, which makes me go, oh, is this something about resurrecting, or is it because there's a double play because the mother was Olivia Bird and now the new Olivia Bird has come back and is like a resurrection of characters? Who knows? It doesn't really get too much fleshed out, but that is a point that is mentioned in the book. Our Carter here is not only a mediocre policeman, in my opinion, but he is also a flirt. Even though he's about a decade younger than Birdie, he shoots his shot, and one leads to another, they end up doing it. Birdie probably is thinking, why not? I don't have long to live. Here is a hot cop. I'm just going to enjoy myself and enjoy what I can get, I guess. That was only a one-time thing for Birdie. She's not looking for long-term, obviously, because she's not here for a long term. And she kicks Carter out once she's done with whatever she needs to do. She grabs a letter from the company, Thanatos, because she's going to go and find out if this company really knows how to predict someone's death day, because she is going to be leaving soon, and I think she wants to know how long has she got. Conveniently, Thanatos is back in London where she lives, and she goes to visit. She's waiting in the reception at this point in time to see the doctor, and this place looks very expensive, brand new and white, almost like one of those luxury spa places that you might go to and spend a whole ton of money. She was able to get an appointment with, surprisingly, 1 day's notice, which seems very convenient on this part. All the staff there also is looking a little bit suspicious because they all look perfectly like models as opposed to, you know, your everyday nurses and doctors there. And the doctor himself looks like he could have just walked off the runway. It turns out this place is open to clients by invitation only. As her name is Olivia Bird, the same as her grandmother, I suspect they were offering an appointment for that reason only. Maybe a point of mistaken identity here, who knows, but she's allowed to go in for a consultation. She needs to answer a truckload of questions, some basic ones like your name, your age, your weight, your height, and then there's like some really personal ones that they ask, like their annual income, and they want to know all the email addresses that you've ever had in the past and present. That is a very specific question, and I don't know why it's useful, but that's what they wanted to know. I don't think I would be able to answer that question and tell you every single email address that I've had because, you know, it includes the work ones that you've had in the past. That could be potentially about 10 to 20 emails depending on who you are, how long you've been alive, basically. When she finally meets with the model-like doctor, he seems to know quite a bit about her already, like the fact that her mum used to call her Birdie, and that her mum unalived herself when she was really young, and they also know about her terminal diagnosis. They take some blood tests and said, hey, that's fine, that's all we need to know, but we'll be in touch. And when I say they are efficient, the very next day she gets the letter, and the letter tells her what her date is going to be. But we don't find out at this point what it's going to be. Obviously, it's part of the mystery. Also, why I think that's why it's important that a lot of the chapters have dates on them. So, you know, we're moving to maybe her end date. Hence why it's always around 30th of October and so forth. Now, if you think these facts are not weird enough, let me tell you the plot just gets weirder from here. You have two separate storylines that both end on cliffhangers, and there is zero linkages between the two women at this point in time. So you have one woman that has potentially fallen off a cliff. You have another woman that knows now her happy death day, but what now? And she says she's got something to do before that day occurs. The only thing that they have now in common is the fact that they at some point all live in Spyglass, but the two time frames are separated by 6 months. So how do they converge? Well, here we go. It's almost like an act two of a play when things start to piece together and there are some major reveals, and you as the reader will try to solve the mystery of what is happening in your head. Is Eden Fox, who she says she is the one that potentially pushed her off the cliff, or is she still alive? Because it really wasn't confirmed, since we're just getting like a bit of her perspective as she's falling, but that doesn't mean she's gone, right? It's now October 31st, as the chapter will tell you, and we get a different point of view, which is Harrison's. Harrison is asleep at Spyglass and wakes up from a knock at the door. It's Carter. Carter is there to ask him where his wife is. Harrison unfortunately doesn't seem to know either. After the art exhibition, they came home and had a nightcap and went to bed, and this morning when he woke up, she's not even there anymore. Turns out there was a man walking his dog and he saw someone who looked like Eden running up the cliff, and she looked upset. When he walked back down, he saw some of her clothing were abandoned near the cliff, which is the cardigan with the stars on it. And it seems like Carter is suspecting that she might have gone up to the cliff to unalive herself, as that spot is really known for that activity. Harrison then calls his wife's phone and hears the ringing from the kitchen drawer, which is a strange place to be hiding like a phone behind some things in a kitchen drawer. At this point, the police is very much leaning to the conclusion that Eden is no longer there, that she's passed away and not alive. But at this point in time, there is no body, so you cannot confirm that. On this exact same day, Birdie is back in Hope's Falls. Obviously, her happy death day is later than Halloween Day because she's still here. She's quit her job now in London, and you don't really know what that job is, but she's quit it, and she's now back here in this small town. Why, you ask? Well, she's at the coffee shop at this present time buying 2 cups of coffee. You are told she goes to the police station because there's something that she needs to confess. Birdie actually needs to confess to Carter that she's the new detective in town and is now his boss. Very surprising, right? Carter is, of course, also shocked because guess what, buddy? Now you've just come to the realization that you've slept with your boss. So the job that Birdie had in London was a detective job, and she was a very good detective back there, which is useful as this small town suddenly has a woman missing and another suspected to have unalived herself. Or are they the same woman? Don't know. Let's see. But rather than trying to solve this case of like the lady that went running and thinks she's Eden versus where the real Eden is, rather than focusing on that, Carter is sitting there reminiscing of their one night stand together and just thirsting over his new boss. Like I said earlier, this man isn't very helpful in solving this case. Birdie thinks Carter is an idiot, and I feel that she has every right to feel that way. Now, Birdie doesn't like to work in the office at the police station because she thinks it's a very depressing place to be. Instead, she likes to do all her detective work at the Smuggler's Inn, which is run by Maddie, so Carter's sister. This is why I say the pub is an important place, because she runs all her business from there. If she needs to talk to Carter at all, then she'll text him and make him go over and meet her at her office officially. She gets caught up on the whole situation with Eden Fox and the woman that also claims to be her, and about how Carter found her at the art exhibition and then threw her keys away and then sort of ran away. Birdie gets Carter to go interview Diana, the gallery owner, who apparently is always on the lookout for a husband number 4 because she's a widow. Even though Carter wastes his time sort of interviewing Diana, it doesn't really eventuate to anything suspicious, except you just get the vibe that if Eden is now out of the picture, Diana is going to be swooping in and trying to claim Harrison because he is quite a catch and he's got quite a bit of money. Birdie is reading a transcript of an interview between Carter and Harrison because they got interviewed at the station at one point in time when he went down there because Harrison thinks that he's got something interesting that he can tell them that will help maybe locate his wife. Like for the fact that Harrison noticed that the wedding ring and engagement ring of Eden was left behind and she never leaves it behind. That is kind of weird, isn't it? And now also during this interview, you do find out where Harrison works, that he's the CEO of a company that is called Thanatos. That's right. He is the owner of the company that can predict your happy death day, and the company that Birdie went to predict her exact date of when she will be leaving this planet. Because she's just discovered this, she's like, okay, there's something fishy going on and there's just too much of a coincidence. I need to go visit Harrison, and she asks Carter to join her. Birdie pretends that she's going there to ask about his missing wife, but really she's there to work out about how Thanos can predict death days, I believe. And the answer is always AI. It is the key part, and it's enough to explain everything these days, apparently. Harrison is certainly acting a little bit suspicious. He even utters the words that I don't have anything to hide, which automatically makes you go, no, I think you're lying about something, or you are lying about everything and you are not to be trusted. They look around the house and it's very neat for a man with a missing wife. He seems to be on a cleaning spree, they've noticed, even changing the bed sheets. Why? Birdie takes Eden's hairbrush, which has strands of her hair in it, for DNA, I suspect. They end up in the small library of the house. Unlike the rest of the house, they notice that this one hasn't been refurbished, hasn't been touched, not renovated like the rest of the house, which is now looking very modernized. And that seems like it's quite odd for a family that is that well off that they could do all the rooms but could not afford or do not want to touch this little small old vintage library. Now, Harris is like hurrying them along. They're like, have you had enough? Have you looked at enough? Because I need to get back to work. And the reason why he needs to get back to work is his company is on the point of being sold, and he's going to come into a ton of money if he can get his sales through for Thanatos. You know, this point that he recognizes Birdie as Olivia Bird, the lady that came to the clinic. He knew that she was not the grandmother because obviously there's a huge age difference, and he can tell the difference between a senior person versus, a mid-age woman, but he lets her come and use the services anyway. Don't know why, but it doesn't matter. It seems like the company is a little bit scammy, and maybe it doesn't do everything that it says it does because the employees are actors. That's why they look like models in the first place. All the actors there are fed lines from Harrison because they're all wearing earpieces, and he tells them exactly what to say at the time for the client that is in front of them. The company uses AI, it uses DNA and bespoken algorithm to predict and really just guess the happy death day. But ultimately, he's the one that decides to tell Olivia Bird the truth of her date based on these algorithms because he never thought he'll see her again. But here she is, unfortunately. Harrison is keeping secrets, maybe about the company, maybe about more. And Carter is also keeping secrets. Turns out Carter had a little crush on Eden, even to the point where at one point he does kiss her, but she stops him and says, no, no, no. He met her for the first time when she showed up at the station a while ago, where she thought that she was being watched and things were making her feel a little bit creepy, and she wanted to report it. And that's how they first interacted. And after that, they sort of kept bumping into each other, maybe even having longer chats, even hanging out together. They even went to the Day of the Dead celebration together once, where they were heavily floating with each other on that day. And once the police go, Harrison is making sure that there's nothing looking suspicious in his house in case the police shows up again and they do a bigger search. So he's making sure that there is no photos of Eden, making sure there's no pictures of Gabrielle's mother are in the house at this point. It seems evident that Harrison had something to do with Eden either going missing or even the Eden not being recognized as the original Eden. So you are very highly suspicious of Harrison at this point in time. From this moment, I'm thinking, Harrison, I think you are the one that has set this all up, since Eden was the one who wanted to put Gabriella in the manor, the luxury prison, and he hates that he went along with it. He never has forgiven her for that point of view. So I was like, is that enough motive for a man to decide to either push a woman off a cliff or to set up this whole thing where the original wife is deemed to be not Eden Fox. I don't know. I feel like that was a little bit loose. Therefore, there is definitely more to the story than that. It's at this moment when Harrison's cleaning up the house that you found out that there's actually something special about the library in the house. The ancient library here was never refurbished because it has a secret passage behind some of the bookshelves and leads somewhere important that is important to the story, but I'll go more into that a little bit later. Because I told you Birdie thinks Carter is quite useless, she tries to distract him by giving him like really low base tasks, including walking her dog Sunday on the beach. Birdie starts striking up a conversation while Carla is away, which is Carter's sister who works at the pub. She finds out that the parents used to run the pub before her and they had run it for 30 years and even lived upstairs. But the owner of the pub decided to sell it off and her parents couldn't afford to buy it and lost it to a brewery and therefore lost sort of where they lived and also their livelihood. The parents are now off to Spain, but the mother is sick. She's got cancer. And then the whole family basically had to exit out of that pub, but at least Maddie still gets to work in it. Now, at that point in time, while she's having this chit chat with Maddie, Carter appears and is found a body at the beach, at Blackwater Bay to be precise. The person on the beach is wearing jeans and a t-shirt, has the same color hair as Eden, but her face unfortunately has been sort of maybe ruined from a fall and the head's been crushed a little bit against the rocks when they possibly jumped and not recognizable. So at this point, you 100% do not know who it is, but obviously lots of signs are pointing to the fact that it's Eden. Which Eden? I suspect is the Eden that was the running one, because she was wearing a t-shirt and jeans, which is what the running Eden changed into after her run. This gets reported to Harrison, and Harrison is pretty now certain that it is Eden and she is now unalive. Now Harrison finds the body as well and is pretty much certain that his wife is unalive and he saw her at the beach. How did he get to the beach? Well, those tunnels that I was telling you about earlier, they lead from the house all the way out to Blackway Bay, where also the cliffs are, but it's not certain it's him, as he seems to know, as he says to his own self, I know who to blame for this situation, which then makes you go, okay, so it's not you. But then are you lying or are you like deceiving us with some of the writing? Don't know yet. Still suspicious of Harrison at this point in time. Reason why he went out to the beach is because he went to look for Eden and found her body, and then he searched the body to get the phone back. Remember the phone that was in the Range Rover? It was covered in plastic in her pocket, and he didn't want that coming back to him and tried to get rid of any evidence, right? Like we said, of his involvement in this situation, and he goes down there and he finds the phone in a pocket. So therefore, I think it's determined that definitely this Eden that is on the beach is the running Eden, because she has the phone with her. She's dressed the same as she was described, and she's got the blonde hair and everything like that. However, the police don't know who this person is at this moment in time. And even that hairbrush that they took from Harrison's house that had strands of hair in it, that hair did not match the DNA of the body, which is strange in itself. But we will find out about that also later in the book. It's now November 1. Carter wakes up in Birdie's bed because, yes, after all the investigation, they slept together. Clearly, they simply can't resist each other. Carter is desperate to prove himself to Birdie that he is a good detective and takes the initiative to go and speak to Gabrielle, the daughter, even though Birdie says that there is no point since the daughter can't talk anyway, but off he goes to the matter. Carter finds out that Gabrielle has a condition called selective mutism due to the trauma of the accident, but she's improving and can now whisper, as we found out earlier when she whispered that Eden is not her mother. She can whisper words thanks to her carer, Mary, who has been working wonders with her and also being able to sort of draw out more painting skills from her as well. He then tries to talk to her, but Gabrielle is not responsive until Mary arrives. As Mary walks in, Carter turns around and he recognizes Mary, but he doesn't know her as Mary. He knows her as Eden Fox. The twists and turns in this book are absolutely unbelievable, but the truth is almost all here to be unraveled. Here are the big twists. As soon as Mary sees Carter, she books it and starts running away. Like I said, all characters in this book love to run. Now, why does she run? Because she knows she's been found out. It turns out Mary was pretending to be Eden Fox the whole time. While the real Eden Fox arrived back at the house after her run, Harrison and Mary were in on it to pretend that Mary was now Eden to get rid of Eden's identity, I guess. Harrison knows the jig is up also at this point in time and starts packing 2 suitcases, one for him and one for her. Mary texts Harrison to tell her that she's been discovered, but he tells her just to stick to the plan. But Mary wants to go back to Hope's Fall because she just can't do this on her own and she needs his help. The plan, unfortunately, hasn't been as smooth as they wanted it to be. The real Eden wasn't meant to be spotted running up the cliff. Her body was never meant to show up. In fact, Harrison was certain that with the tides of the beach, her body should have washed away and never to be seen again. But unfortunately, it was discovered on the beach. Carter was not meant to discover, obviously, that Mary was pretending to be Eden. Carter goes and reveals all this to Birdie because, you know, it's a great discovery. And they go to Harrison's house that night to go and arrest him. But things don't go very smoothly here because Birdie is not really who she says she is either. She's not Carter's new boss. She rocked up and only pretended to be the new detective in town, which is why I guess she never ever worked in the office because she would have been easier to discover. So she kept that facade up and pretended that she didn't like to work in the office and instead worked in a pub and then just told Carter all the time to meet her there in case she bumped into any of his peers. Why did she show up and pretend to be the detective and to pretend to be Carter's boss? Well, it's because she is there also to help with the whole elaborate plan with Harrison and Mary. It's now the 2nd of November, and why is this date quite significant? It's the day that Thanatos had advised that Birdie that this is your happy death day. It is her last day on Earth, so she has nothing to lose. When Carter finds out Birdie's been lying, she knocks him out, and Harrison drives off to collect his daughter from the manor. With the sale of his business now, Harrison has come into a ton of money, and what he's going to do is basically start a new life with Gabrielle and Mary because he's fallen for her. This man just likes to fall for a few people, as you'll see later. Now, before he's getting to the manor and he's in his car and he's driving, suddenly he noticed that a cold hand appears from the back seat and touches him on the shoulder, which is going to like freak anybody out. And the voice is a female voice, and she whispers, "I love you to the moon and back," which is also very freaky. So you're like, oh my God, Eden is alive and she's going to get him, right? But no, it's not Eden, it is Gabrielle, the daughter. She hitched a ride with Mary when Mary was driving back from the manor back to Hope Falls. And while Mary was doing whatever Mary was doing, she got out of her car and then snuck and hid in her father's car to, I don't know, go on a little adventure that she wanted. And she wanted to hang out with her dad because remember, she adores him. And that's how she ended up in the car. Whilst this is happening, Carter wakes up from being knocked out and he's in the tunnel just behind that bookshelf in the library. Birdie has locked him in there and she's in the library on the other side. And the only way for him to leave is to keep continuing down the tunnel and end up at the beach. Since it's Birdie's last day on Earth, she's sitting there at the library and she's pretty much just having a confessional with Carter at this point in time to get everything off her chest before it is the end of day and it's too late. Now, remember how we said that Birdie's grandmother didn't really see anyone, but she did have a live-in carer? Well, that carer was Mary. Birdie's grandmother had promised the house to Mary for looking after her for almost 20 years, but when she didn't inherit it, she was pissed. So what she did is she started working at the manor where she knew Gabrielle was, and she wanted to befriend the new owners, Harrison and Eden. However, I wasn't really clear at how befriending the people that owned the house that you thought you rightly deserved was going to get you the house in the end of the day. Was her plan to seduce Harrison, or was her plan to get rid of them but that would still not let her inherit the house. So that little plot line was a little bit unclear to me. Then you find out, which is a huge twist, Eden is not Gabrielle's biological mother. Her real mother is Birdie. She was married to Harrison, and 10 years ago when the accident happened, she was an up-and-coming detective who was always busy with work. Harrison was just trying to get his company off the ground. At this point, that company didn't even have a name, which is why when Birdie went to Thanatos, she didn't know it belonged to Harrison, which was a good explanation. We're back to that unfortunate day. Since both parents were busy with their careers, they had to hire a nanny, who was Eden. Birdie was off working somewhere else on that day, but Harrison was home cheating on his wife. Like I said, this man likes to fall in love a lot, including fall in love with his help all the time. First there's Eden, now there's Mary. Who knows who is to be next? The man is so busy, he couldn't look after his child, so that's why he got a nanny. But he had time to have an affair and have a rompy-pompy. As I said earlier, that afternoon, they did the deed. So Eden and Harrison are having an affair. They do it in the house, and they think Gabrielle is out riding her bike, and she has disappeared for that time being. But she wasn't on the bike, and she wasn't outside, because Gabrielle loves to play hide and seek. And what she was doing, she was hiding in a place where they couldn't see her, but she could see him. After Harrison gets up and has a shower and leaves, that bit happened, Gabrielle confronts Eden and says, I saw what you were doing in the bedroom with my dad, and I'm going to tell my mom, and she's going to be pissed. And instead of just accepting it and having to come clean with the situation, what Eden does is push her down the stairs. And therefore, Gabrielle has had this traumatic accident. It looks like she's hit her head, and she's just lying there as someone would lie on the ground if they were also hit by a car. You see where I'm going with this. So rather than calling anyone for help to help Gabrielle, because at this point she's still alive, she pretends that Gabrielle is missing. She tells Harrison calls the police, aka he calls his wife, because Birdie is a detective. And Birdie rushes home, and she's obviously in a little bit of a haze, and she's somewhat speeding, right? And it's dark and it's a rainy day. And then she hits Gabrielle's bike when she sees the bike in front of her, because it's a rush. She thinks she's hit the bike. She thinks she's also hit Gabrielle, because her daughter was riding around. Because when she got out of the car, there is Gabrielle lying next to the bike, and her body looks broken. But in reality, Eden had set that up, because her body was already broken by being pushed down the stairs. She placed the bike just in front, knowing that Gabrielle was probably not going to see it in time and hit it, and then think to herself that she also hit the bike, which had her daughter, and now her daughter has fallen off, and now she's unconscious on the ground, looking broken. Birdie has been feeling this guilt this whole time, as she thinks she's the one that had hit her daughter with her car and caused the accident, and therefore could not really live with herself and disappeared from everybody's lives because she was too ashamed to face Gabrielle, and she therefore became that recluse because she thinks she doesn't deserve any sort of happiness in her life for what she did. Eden moved in with Harrison to help take care of Gabrielle and ended up marrying Harrison after a couple of years later. And Eden is in fact Gabrielle's stepmom, which makes sense why that she thinks that Gabrielle never really liked her, because she probably doesn't, because she probably remembers what you did, you big old cow. Since Birdie got her death day, the confirmation of her happy death day 6 months ago, she finally decides she needs to do a few things, which is basically say goodbye to Gabrielle at the manor and see her daughter one last time. It is there that she meets Mary, and Gabrielle sees her and finally speaks and call her mummy. So that's the very first time that Gabrielle's able to speak. As Gabrielle then, from that moment on, starts getting better at communicating, she tells Birdie about what really happened that night, and hence the revenge plot is formed between Birdie, Harrison, and Mary, and that's why they're all in on it together. It was Birdie's intention to be the one that unalived Eden on the cliff, but someone beat her to the punch. So still, we don't know who was the pusher of Eden's body. Also, the body, like I said, was never meant to show up. The hope was that they could just make the real Eden disappear, and Mary will continue pretending to be Eden and live happily ever after in the house. And therefore, then Mary gets the house she always thought she deserved. Plus, at this point, Mary and Harrison have, a thing with each other, and they could just continue on their merry way and probably bring Gabrielle out of the manor into the house, and everything will be happy and dandy. And that is a plan. But as I said, not as smooth as I wanted it to be. Harrison brought spyglass from Birdie once the plan was set into place 6 months ago and moved himself and Eden there to execute this elaborate situation. He would get rid of her without having to divorce her because he didn't want to give her any money. They married and there was no prenup, and he was about to come into a ton of money and he didn't want her to have a cent of it, rightly so, because of what he did to her daughter. Mary would get spyglass and Birdie could, pass away in peace knowing that Gabrielle will be out of the manor and looked after well by hopefully Harrison and Mary. Perfect. The perfect plan. Once Birdie confesses everything, she takes a bunch of pills since it is her death day and she wants to be in control of her destiny, and it is quite painful, her terminal illness, and she doesn't want to suffer. So she just takes the whole bunch of pills, waits there, and just passes away. Or does she? Because Carter escapes the tunnel and rushes back to Birdie just in time and performs CPR on her and brings her back to life. At this point, you are thinking, wow, that is a lot. But bear with me because there is a little bit more to come, because we still need to know who pushed Eden, right? Here comes the chaos that is the ending of this book. We will fast forward 1 year now and Birdie is alive. Not only is she alive, she is no longer terminal. The cancer has shrunk and all is dandy. Apparently living in Hope Falls at the beach with that lovely fresh air, it has helped her not be terminal and not have cancer anymore. As we had suspected, Thanatos is not always accurate with their predictions. It's almost like an educator guess that they do, but it's not exact. But Harrison doesn't tell anyone that because he sold his company for a bucket load of money and now has moved to Switzerland with Mary. Gabrielle is also there and properly cared for, and at times she also comes to visit Birdie at Hope's Ford to spend time with her mother, which is very nice. And her visits and also Birdie's living expenses are now all covered by Harrison, because ultimately, Harrison will fund his daughter, but he also used to love his ex-wife, Birdie. And now that he's found out that it wasn't Birdie's fault at all what happened to Gabrielle, he is going to at least fund their lifestyle. Now, one more twist to happen, because I still haven't told you who pushed Eden. Let's go back to Carter, because it's to do with him. Carter is married. Did you know that? Nope, I was surprised too. He had a one-night stand with a lady named Jane and she got pregnant. Plain Jane as she's known. And to do the right thing, he married her even though he's not into her at all. Hence why he develops crushes on everybody else and sleeps with his boss, etc., etc. Jane here though is a very sweet lady and even at one point invites Birdie over for dinner to the house since she's Carter's boss and all, and she wants to make nice with Carter and her boss. Carter is a real douchebag. If you don't love the woman, then set her free rather than just keeping her there, because she knows how Carter feels about her, that he's not into her. And she also knows about all of Carter's cheating. He knows he slept with his boss. And she also knows that Carter had a thing for Eden and thought that they were having an affair as well. So remember that one time when they kissed, when really Eden and Carter was kissing, or Mary and Carter was kissing because Mary was pretending to be Eden, yada yada, remember? And once she saw they were kissing, she thought also he was cheating on her at that point as well with Eden. So knowing that your husband doesn't love you and that he's always going to be cheating on you and you're always just going to be the plain unwanted wife, it probably spiraled her into a depressive state. Because that day when Eden was at the cliff waiting for Harrison, Jane went up the cliff as well because she potentially was going to jump and end her life there. But then she sees Eden, the woman who seduced her husband, and her rage of being the plain Jane her whole life sent her into a frenzy, and she was sick of just being a pushover and doormat. So she decided at that point to push Eden off the cliff, and that's who pushed Eden. She was also going to unalive Birdie too on the 2nd of November, but when she got to the house, Birdie already looked like she was long gone, and because she had taken the pills, and therefore she just left and didn't do that. And now she just continues her life with Carter, even though Birdie's still there, but who knows? Maybe that's like a cliffhanger to say maybe she'll do something to Birdie one day. Let's hope not. But at this point in time, that's where it ends for us. And it is a happy ending for everybody, or for most people involved, because Carter gets promoted to be a detective. Birdie's living a lovely life. She gets to reunite with her daughter, and Harrison has a new wife. So here are my final thoughts on the book. It was definitely a twisty ride. My expectation that this author was going to shock me with all the twists, and that definitely met my expectation, and I was not disappointed. Was the twist sort of overwhelming and too much? Yes, it was. Was the twist clever? I think it was, just because I found a lot of them hard to pick up. I didn't know some of the twists were going to come. Maybe it's because I haven't read a lot of this author's books before, because this is my first, or I haven't even read a lot of thriller books. So therefore, this could be a pattern that thriller writers do all the time nowadays in their stories. And if I read more, maybe I would have been able to notice them. You let me know if you are an avid thriller reader. Did you pick up on it? Or perhaps I need to get a little bit smarter. I don't know. Was the book good? If you enjoy a lot of twists and turns, then yes, it was a good book. If you need something to be explained and believable, you might be left with some questions, as I was, or some thoughts about the characters and their development. The whole plan was based on Gabrielle telling Birdie what happened, which Carter even points out into the book that potentially it was an unreliable narrative from Gabrielle, because it happened to her when she was 8 and her brain has been stuck at 8 years old, and she never really liked Eden in the first place. So could she have been making this up? And it was never confirmed, and it was never sort of laid out to me that this was the truth. And if there wasn't the truth, then what they did was terribly horrible to do to Eden, in my opinion. Also, I think Jane needed a bit more development to her personality and to her character, coming from a point of view where she's like this sweet, plain Jane that accepted everything, and rather than trying to make her marriage work or trying to confront Carter with what his dalliances are, she goes up to the cliff just to sort of end it there. But instead of ending it, there's a flip where she becomes this ruthless killer. But I believe that this writer tends to do that, where the least likely person in the book, the sweetest person in the book, ends up being the one that is the true unaliver, which happened here. Also, my problem was that Harrison and Carter, these cheating husbands, shouldn't just have gotten away unscathed. Everything ends up so dandy for both Carter and Harrison. Carter gets a promotion. Harrison gets to live another new life with his new younger model, Mary, and he gets the money, and he also gets the daughter back. He sold his company, even though it's a little bit scammy at times, because he tried to sort of pretend to the investors that it can predict happy death days, even though we know that is not to be true. Because not only did it not work for Birdie, he tried it on himself and it was not accurate either. And also, he's a man that just can't keep his eggplant in his pants for very long at all. And he always likes to dilly the help, which is not a great trait. And therefore, I think he should be a little bit punished. I didn't also enjoy that Birdie's character didn't seem to blame Harrison at all for the situation that happened to the daughter, and said that Eden was the one who stole her husband and ruined her life. Everyone, I think, in this story has a bit to blame. Like, if you have a child, look after your child. Don't rely on somebody else, and definitely don't have a rendezvous when your child needs to be looked after. But yes, if Eden was the one that pushed Gabrielle, she is evil, and I think the revenge is fair from Birdie's point of view, because she had to suffer all this time thinking that she was the one that did this to her daughter, and she's been a recluse and she lost everything. But also, Birdie shouldn't be so forgiving of Harrison, which is why I guess Harrison funding her lifestyle is the compensation that he's going to be giving for her for the rest of her life. But I'm still a bit conflicted of that story. Overall, though, my first Alice Feeney book, and I enjoyed myself. I would rate it a 4 out of 5 stars at the end of the day, because I think this writer was very clever in the way she wrote things to throw you off if you were not clued into the way she writes. For example, she gave you clues that Eden and Gabrielle's mother are 2 different people. She would get Harrison to say things like, on the day I know Eden did the wrong thing, Gabrielle's mother certainly blames herself. So if you read it as I read it from the first go, you would say, okay, so Eden's the mother, Eden's the wife, she did it wrong, and as the mother of Gabrielle, she feels guilty about it. But really, if you read it the second time, once you know the story, oh, he's referring to two different people, and that is quite a clever writing. Like, it's enough little bit of a clue for people that are tuned into that to notice that I think you're talking about two different people. But as a reader that doesn't read a lot of thrillers, or this is the first time reading that sort of style, you would be obviously tricked to read it as it is stated in the book, as I was. So for that, and because of the twist, and because it fulfilled my desire for a twisty book, that's why I rated quite a high star, even though some of the characters were not as developed as I would like them to be, and some of the plot lines were a little bit holy. If you made it through the twist recap, congratulations. You know more than the characters in this book. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next spiral. Bye.